Well, that is striking. That style. Look at that. I have to say, excellent taste, without unnecessary frills, yet playful, as every detail has a purpose. That cut, that simplicity, and especially that choice of colors. I suddenly feel the urge to photograph you, or at least to ask you where you got that from. Your work often starts from something very tangible. Those backgrounds, the objects, the cardboard. Why do you start with the physical construction first before you create the image? So what does that do to the story you ultimately tell? For me, a story only truly begins when I can touch it. It bears the marks of mass consumption, transport and waste. By building a set first, it forces me to look slowly. The narrative grows not just from the idea, but also from the shadows, the edges, or small imperfections. And only then do I decide, let me visualize this in soft daylight or in something artificial, dramatic, or colorful, as my translation of what pop art looks like in my universe. You sometimes work illustratively, and your images seem to balance between darkness and something almost cheerful. How do you determine when a drawing can be light or when it needs roughness? That's often context driven. I look at the world and it's rarely ambiguous. A cheerful line can convey something uncomfortable, and a dark surface can convey a softness. I use humor as a getaway. You can come in, even laugh, but once you're inside, you realize it's about something that's not that easily digestible. In your images, I often see the echoes of mass consumption, the malleability of the world, and at the same time something vulnerable. How do you relate to that criticism without becoming moralistic? I try to speak from a place of wonder, not condemnation. Cardboard is something everybody knows. It's not elitist. It comes from boxes, from online orders, from things we quickly forget. By illuminating it, sometimes warmly, sometimes theatrically, I show how thin the line is between comfort and suffocation. The wink is essential. Without it, criticism becomes harsh, and harshness excludes people. We share a clear position against racism, against extreme ideologies, and we are both concerned about the climate. How do you ensure that these points of view are tangible without becoming slogans? By choosing our positions in stories, because I don't believe in finger wagging. An image may pose questions without providing answers. Those who view the image must take responsibility for themselves. Perhaps that's our warmest quality, because we give trust to the public. You often work with images that arise from discomfort, clutter, or situations that are better ignored. Does beauty exist for you before you start drawing, or do you have to force it out? I suspect that beauty hides for self-protection. Ugly things are more often honest. They don't try to be liked. As an artist, I can lift them up for a moment. Not to make them more beautiful, but to make them more visible. Beauty then arises from attention, not from embellishment. Now Now, you work with cardboard, a material that's often no longer seen once it's lost its original function. When does something ugly become beautiful for you, and when do you no longer trust it? When the material resists, when a fault doesn't fall like I expect. Beauty is born precisely there, when control and failure briefly interact. When it becomes too beautiful, I know I have to stop. Cardboard has already had a life before you touched it. Boxes, logistics, online orders, waste. How do you deal with that past? Is it baggage or fuel for your narrative? I see it as a biography that I don't want to erase. Every fault says something. Every dent is a reminder of speed, consumption, movement. Actually, I work with characters that are already tired before they even appear on screen. Do you think beauty comes from addition or omission? As an illustrator, you naturally do nothing but add and subtract. So I'd rather answer that it's my own interpretation, and the imperfection should be visible. Like a bandage on a wound. Imperfection doesn't hide anything, but it makes it more bearable because it doesn't need to be perfect. Your drawings are sometimes charming and sometimes uncomfortable. Do you consciously sabotage the beauty, or does it happen by accident? And do you pretend it was meant that way? I pretend it was an accident, but I planned it carefully. Beauty is a trap. I set it up and I see who falls for it. Do you think your intervention carries an ethical responsibility? Or in other words, can an artist aestheticize everything? Not everything, but question everything. So as soon as something becomes too good to be true, I start to distrust it. My job isn't to soften the blow, it is to create tension, and I like a joke with a punchy punchline. You switch between natural light and artificially colored light. When do things lie to you, and when does it tell the truth? Natural light pretends to be neutral. Colored light is more honest. It admits to its manipulation. A bit like social media, but without the algorithm. If you had to rebuild a world out of cardboard today, what would you make first? And what would you consciously forget? Maybe I should start with a town square without a function. No ads, no Wi-Fi, no reason to be there. And I'd probably forget the like button. It's difficult to fold with cardboard. Your work is warm but critical. Is that a conscious choice, or is that just your character? My character, I suspect, because I'm wary of work that's just angry. Warmth isn't necessarily reconciliation. It's an invitation to a conversation, to a genuine dialogue between equals. When do you think an image becomes politically charged? And when does it become dangerously easy? When it no longer allows for ambiguity, it is often filled with extremism, hatred, and doubt. That's why I prefer to draw my characters who don't quite know what they're doing. This way, I give the viewer room to interpret images for themselves. I've heard rumors about a new series of drawings in which figures half disappear into their environment. Is that a coincidence, or is it a commentary on how people exist today? They are figures that want to be many things at once. They wear their job, their opinions, their ecological guilt and their social media profile on their body. Disappearing, therefore, is a logical composition for many, as they feel unseen and misunderstood. And you? What is in your studio that nobody has been allowed to see yet? I heard something about a cardboard cityscape that slowly collapses. Is that a planned failure? Perhaps a happy disaster? Absolutely. The work has a working title. It's meant to be temporary, or maybe it will be okay until it's not. I'm not entirely sure yet. This collapse isn't a climax, but more like a relief. Like admitting that perfection is a marketing term. I've also previously created boats that are floating in the water, but that burst into flames. Suppose you had a new project with no deadline and no client. What would you draw first? A city where everything is right, except the people, or vice versa. If students were to ask you what they should most learn before they are creating work, what would you advise them against? Quick success. And working without a doubt, because doubt is immaterial. Those who don't use that material are left empty-handed. If this conversation was ever played in a classroom, what would you hope those students would remember about failure? That failure is material, not an endpoint. On the contrary, you learn a great deal from failure. And that cardboard is cheaper than fear, of course. We often laugh at work, but rarely without a reason. Is humor a stylistic device or a survival mechanism for you? Both. Sometimes it's like a smokescreen, when I don't quite know what I'm actually saying. But it's mainly like a filter that makes everything more digestible. Anything that doesn't have humor in it is suspect to me. Your process is physical, cumbersome. Is this slowness a resistance or rather a necessity in this fast-paced world? Neither. The slowness stems from my way of working. It certainly does not come from my philosophical way of thinking. The cardboard forces me to slow down my process. If I had a different work process, I might be in a permanent state of acceleration. Suppose that someone claims that our work is remarkably related. Would you see that as a coincidence or as a proof that one look can take many forms? I would say the content always seeks its own medium. Sometimes she draws and sometimes she makes herself out of cardboard. Do you think we'll ever be done looking at this world? Hopefully not. Then she would really become dangerous. If you could hope for one thing that people take away from your work, what would it be? That they look more carefully and perhaps become more gentle with the world and with each other? And you? That it's okay to be critical, but still remain playful. If this interview was actually with yourself, would you be happy with the answers? Not quite. And that's exactly what I need to continue working as I strive for better work. You look critically at this world, but also at your own practice. You work with graphics, a discipline with a toxic past, When did you realize that it couldn't go on like this anymore? When I realized my criticism of this world could not be expressed with poison. I have switched from classical, toxic techniques to non-toxic printmaking. Not because it sounds clean, but because it fits better within my thinking. Does that change the picture? No. But I'm having a lot of fun learning and experimenting again because I have to learn everything all over again. Oddly enough, my visual language hasn't changed because of the technology, but because of my conscious choice for a different, simplified visual language. This desire for change stems from my desire to animate, something I've been experimenting with for a while now. You've experienced a similar transition from analog to something different. What did that shift do to the way you work? Where analog taught me to wait, digital taught me to doubt and to be strict. I have evolved from a purely analog to a hybrid form, and now I exclusively work digitally. That sounds like a loss. I don't see it that way. It was more like an acceleration, or better yet, it was like a disruptive transformation. Your drawing style is very recognizable, but also strikingly clear. Was it always like that, or was there a deliberate break? I wasn't just looking for simplification, but for that unique style, which, by the way, I'm still developing. And that animation? Exactly. Not to say less, but to be able to draw faster. My first animation was far too realistic. It took me 4 months of drawing for a good 2 minutes of animation. It simply had to be faster. Your work clearly touches on overconsumption, so why the cardboard? Because it is the most honest material that we collectively ignore. We all consume it widely, and for many people it's the packaging that shields them, keeping up appearances, you know. It comes from the customer society, and it also returns to it. But you rarely name the team literally. That's deliberate, because it's not interesting to literally say what you're showing. By using waste materials, I don't have to constantly talk about consumption. The team remains, but I gain poetic freedom. The content doesn't disappear, it whispers within the background. So actually, your material is already an opinion. Yes, your technique too, even when you simplify it.